My clients didn't trust their kids, and honestly, I can't blame them. I'm an estate planning attorney. Been doing this for over 2 decades, and I've seen everything from tearful gratitude to full-blown inheritance-fueled civil wars. But this case has stayed with me, not because it was flashy or dramatic, but because it worked. Even though nobody ended up happy. And that was the point. It started a little over 10 years ago when Mark and Denise walked into my office. Married 32 years at the time, late 50s, both recently retired. They'd built a modest but solid estate between savings, a paid-off home, some rental properties, and retirement accounts. They were sitting on just over $3.2 million. They didn't strike me as overly cautious or paranoid. In fact, they were warm, kind, and had a quiet sort of confidence about them. But as soon as we sat down, I could feel there was something deeper simmering beneath the surface. They had 3 adult kids, Kevin, Rachel, and Danny. On paper, everything looked straightforward. No dramatic holdings, no celebrity status, no messy business partnerships. But when you've been in this business long enough, you learn that complexity rarely lives in the numbers. It lives in the people. We want to be fair, Denise said, laying a manila folder on the conference table. But we're also realists. Our kids aren't bad people, but we've got concerns. Mark leaned forward, his elbows resting on the table like he'd been waiting years to unload. They each have their own vulnerabilities. And we want to make sure this money doesn't disappear 5 years after we're gone. They'd attended one of my estate planning webinars, so they weren't walking in blind. They knew they didn't want the government dictating where things went, and they definitely didn't want probate dragging their estate through the courts. But what they hadn't figured out was how far to go in protecting the money once it hit their children's hands. We started with the basics. A revocable living trust to avoid probate and keep things private. That part was easy. The harder conversation came when I introduced the idea of adding protective inheritance trusts for the kids, built-in subtrusts under the living trust umbrella that would guard against things like divorce, lawsuits, poor money management, and even addiction. Denise tilted her head. But wouldn't that send the message that we don't trust them? It might, I said, nodding slowly. But it also sends the message that you trust the system you're putting in place to outlast your worries. The goal isn't control for the sake of control, it's protection. They weren't sold right away. The next hour turned into a kind of family therapy session. We walked through their kids' lives, one by one. Kevin, the oldest, was in his late 30s. Married, 2 kids of his own. Seemed stable on the surface. He's responsible, Mark offered. He's got a good job. Engineering firm. But his wife, Stephanie, let's just say she's very assertive. Controlling, Denise said flatly. Kevin defers to her on everything. And I mean everything. They told me about the time they tried to gift Kevin and Stephanie $20,000 a few years back to help them buy a reliable family car. Their old minivan had broken down, and Kevin had sounded grateful. A week later, they got a text, not even a call, from Kevin thanking them for helping with his dream opportunity. Turns out, Stephanie had convinced him to use the entire amount as a down payment on a timeshare condo in Florida. He didn't even tell us until months later, Mark said, shaking his head. Denise was still visibly upset. And now they can't afford new tires. He asked to borrow money again just last month. I don't want her getting her hands on our money. Next was Rachel, the middle child, early 30s, single, worked in nonprofit development. Brilliant, passionate, and flat broke. She's got a heart the size of Texas, Denise said with genuine affection, but she couldn't manage a budget if her life depended on it. Mark sighed. She once donated half her tax refund to an animal sanctuary she volunteered at, even though she owed rent. That kind of thing. Always well-meaning, but it makes us nervous. They told me more. Rachel had moved 6 times in 7 years, chasing jobs and causes that inspired her but rarely paid well, or at all. She once worked a full-time role for an arts nonprofit that offered her a stipend of $600 a month. She lived in a garage apartment with no heat and bartered grant writing services for groceries. "We're proud of her," Denise said. "We really are. But she'd give away everything she inherits if she thought it would help someone." Finally, there was Danny, the youngest. Late 20s, talented musician, currently working part-time at a brewery while trying to make it with his indie band. He had a warm smile and a trail of half-finished creative projects stretching back to high school. "He's sweet," Denise said, "but immature. And frankly, we worry he's experimenting with more than just beer." They didn't have hard proof of drug use, but the red flags were there. Danny had once asked for a loan to cover studio time that mysteriously vanished without explanation. A couple of his old bandmates had stopped returning his calls. He'd bounced around friends' couches after a stint in rehab 2 years ago. "And Rachel paid for that out of her own IRA," Mark said quietly. Denise's voice caught. "She didn't tell us until much later. Said she didn't want to worry us." By the time we finished reviewing each child, I steered the conversation back to planning. "Here's what I'd recommend," I said. "We set up the revocable trust for your estate. Then, instead of everything going directly to the kids, we create 3 protective inheritance trusts, one for each of them." "Each with its own rules?" Mark asked. "Same structure, different applications. You choose a trustee, ideally a neutral third party like a trust company, and that trustee manages the funds. The kids can request distributions, but the trustee evaluates each request. That way, the money is there to help them, but it's not a blank check." Denise leaned back in her chair, arms folded. "And they can't blow it on timeshares or hand it to a boyfriend." "Exactly," I said. They mulled it over. I could see the tension between wanting to protect their children and not wanting to insult them. It's a delicate line, and most parents struggle with it. "What about using my cousin Joanne as trustee?" Denise asked after a long pause. "She's sharp, and she knows the kids." "She might work," I said carefully. "But be aware, if any of the kids resent her decisions, it could create a permanent rift. And Joanne's not a professional trustee. She might feel overwhelmed." They looked at each other. Silent communication passed between them. Mark finally nodded. "Let's use a trust company. No drama." I connected them with a firm I'd worked with many times, experienced, responsive, and impartial. We signed the documents. Their assets were moved into the trust. We drafted letters of intent for each child, explaining not just the how, but the why behind their decisions. And that was the last time I saw them in person. For years, I'd get a holiday card. One Christmas, I received a photo of all 3 kids and the grandkids on a beach. Everyone smiling, Kevin's kids building sandcastles, Rachel in a sun hat, Danny holding a guitar. Denise had written a note in careful script. "Thank you for the peace of mind." That card stayed pinned to my corkboard. 6 months ago, I got the call. Mark and Denise had been killed in a highway accident on their way home from a weekend in the mountains. A semi-truck jackknifed it in heavy rain. There were no survivors. My stomach sank. Not just because I'd liked them, but because I knew what was coming next. I called the trust company immediately and scheduled a meeting with the 3 children. They knew their parents had done some kind of trust, but they had no idea what it contained. They arrived at my office 2 weeks later. Kevin looked tense, eyes darting toward his phone every few minutes. Rachel came in late, still in a work badge from a local nonprofit, clutching a reusable coffee cup and an overstuffed tote. Danny wore sunglasses indoors and reeked faintly of cologne and something else I couldn't quite place. "Thanks for coming," I said. "I know this is a hard time, so I'll get right to it. Your parents created a comprehensive estate plan 10 years ago. Everything was transferred into a revocable trust, which is now irrevocable." Kevin shifted in his seat. "Okay. So, what happens now?" "Well," I said, "their assets are being divided into 3 equal shares. Each share is placed into a protective inheritance trust with a corporate trustee managing it. You are the beneficiaries. The trustee will manage the funds and approve distributions based on your needs and your parents' instructions. Rachel frowned. Wait. So we don't get the money directly? No, I said gently. You can request funds, and the trustee will evaluate each request. Danny sat up straighter, his sunglasses slipping slightly. You mean we have to ask permission? For our own inheritance? Yes, I said. And that was their choice. They weren't punishing you. They were protecting you. Kevin's jaw tightened. So they didn't trust us. I looked at him carefully. They trusted you enough to make a plan for your future. And they trusted that life can throw curveballs. This wasn't about control. It was about making sure your inheritance is still there when you really need it. Rachel looked down at her lap. They thought I'd blow it on donations, didn't they? I remembered Denise's voice when she told me about the sanctuary. She wasn't angry. She was proud and terrified that pride would lead Rachel into poverty. They loved your generosity, I said. And they knew your heart. That's why they built something to protect it. Danny let out a bitter laugh. I'm 30. I can't touch my own money without filing a request form. You can, I said. And you'll find the trustee reasonable. But this setup ensures your money lasts. For you. And maybe one day, your children. The room was silent. Kevin broke it. My wife's going to be livid. She was expecting a check. Rachel whispered, I just wish they told us. Danny stood abruptly. Well, thanks for the info, he muttered, and walked out. The meeting ended with hugs, but they were hollow. The kind you give out of obligation, not connection. No one smiled. No one celebrated. But no one contested the trust either. Weeks passed. Kevin called to request funds for his kids' tuition. The trustee approved it immediately. Rachel asked for help with a down payment on a condo near her new job. She got it. Danny didn't reach out. But the trustee made a few discretionary distributions for medical expenses. Quiet ones. And just like that, the plan did exactly what it was designed to do. No money vanished into a bad investment. No opportunistic spouse got their hands on it in a divorce. No court needed to intervene for minor grandchildren. No well-meaning adult child accidentally ruined their own safety net. They didn't love it. But they were protected. And in my line of work, that's the best kind of ending I can offer. This story was fictional, but it highlights some of the chaos that can happen in actual estates. If you want to plan your estate the right way, get your free ebook at www.estateplanning.ebook.com.